Hi everybody, my name's Steve Hodges. I'm Director of Learning at Woolwich Poly, an Assistant Head, and what I'm going to be presenting to you is our plan and our framework for our remote learning. I'm also going to be discussing about how questioning has been really important with our remote education that we're providing. Even in the classroom at the moment, how we've kind of refined and reflected upon how we question as teachers. So this is a slide showing our aims. These were a series of aims that we put together to kind of develop our remote learning. A couple of things in terms of providing internet access for the students so everybody can gain access, and any type of remote packs sent out were for the students were based on core content with clear instructions so students didn't move at different paces. We stripped back basically our curriculum and focused on what was essential in the delivery of our lessons. So we had teachers look at what the lessons were and how could we just focus on the core content. The major reason behind this was we were trying to make it workload light. So we want to deliver, or we do deliver lessons that don't need a huge amount of adaptation, where we can use what we want to focus on within our curriculum framework, but it doesn't take away from the core delivery of what we want in our lessons. We found that scaffolding and modelling in our remote lessons is really important. So we've reflected upon this by making that it's delivered in small chunks now, to keep the students focused and engaged in what we're delivering and having them understand what we're trying to deliver, but also that we can assess as we continually teach to understand where we are and what feedback we need to provide as teachers. So these were our aims. So what did this lead on to? So we used research and the feedback from our staff working within departments and feeding back to the learning achievement team. We provide kind of a framework and a skeleton, and then they go off and come up with their ideas as well and feedback to us, and eventually we come up with a school kind of framework. But again, it's also adapted by the departments themselves. So we looked at what makes great teaching. And this was an Education Endowment Foundation report that they produced. We researched Mark Enser's work as well. He was quite vocal in terms of remote teaching at the time, and this built this framework that we have. So we looked at one of the points where teaching quality is more important than how the lessons are delivered. So what we wanted to do, as I said, is make sure that it's course specific. We didn't really want those add-ons anymore, where it's time restricted, but also we didn't want students to extend their knowledge and increase that gap, which is something we found with the reading as well. We're in one of the most deprived areas in London, and our disadvantaged students, the gap would have increased over lockdown, and it is still a large gap. So something, if you're aware of the Matthew effect, for disadvantaged students, we tried to close that gap and make sure students are moving at the same pace. So we wanted to put emphasis on the quality of lessons, and as I said, scaffolding and delivering in small chunks, modelling had become really important with our type of remote learning that we deliver here. As I said, disadvantaged students, we provided access for those students. Why did we do online teaching? Well, one of the factors was the well-being of staff and well-being of teachers, to have that dialogue, to have that communication live, where we can interact with the students and allowing sometimes students to work collaboratively. It's quite difficult with a chat room because it can be sometimes a bit chaotic. So it would need, we have this structure where teachers kind of referee the discussions that take place, and their short discussions, and where people lead conversations, other people listen and then contribute. So that kind of leads to something that we tried to establish, where it's low stakes in terms of the the conversations and the dialogue, and even the answering to questions that take place, where students feel confident to take part. And if they don't want to participate verbally, they can use the chat box. And that's been really, really popular with the feedback that we can get from students and also the conversations that take place. So we wanted to support our students in terms of taking ownership over their learning. Self-reflection and self-regulation has become really, really important. Sorry about that. With our self-regulation, we've encouraged as a school in general revision and retrieval techniques. So what we've pushed in the past is flashcards, and this is something that we've brought into our remote learning, where students are actively encouraged to work on areas they need to develop rather than revising material that they already know and feel confident about just revising that. We want students to reflect on what areas they need to improve on and work on those through revision. So flashcards have been essential with developing that. And a growth mindset, as I said, and reading forwards, using challenging texts for students to read. So forward learning we're looking at in terms of reading up on text in advance, so students can read the material and understand it when we actually deliver it. So that was built around this existing framework that we have within the school. So we want to keep the structure, but as I said, we wanted to keep also the really important bits of our lessons. So the add-ons that we have and the extended tasks, we wanted to try and keep it so it's this train that I refer to, where all the students are moving at the same pace, so we don't have these gaps getting bigger, which ultimately led to this framework. So at the school, we have a PolyMAT quiz, which is a retrieval task. The planning behind this was originally looking at interleaving and space practice, but the more we researched on this and the feedback from teachers, we found that interleaving was very difficult to do. Did we fully understand what it was, and was it going to be helpful for our curriculum? So we decided to just go with space practice, and this was something we have in our remote learning. Basically, if you don't know space practice, we're kind of jumping back with old knowledge in time, and we're allowing the students to kind of retrieve that old knowledge. What we do with our pop quizzes that we have, it's structured that what we had last lesson, and within that series of questions, what we've done in the whole topic, and then what we did the topic before, or 2 topics before. So we're jumping back and quizzing the students on old knowledge. Within that, we have a read now. Again, we're talking about the Matthew effects. We don't really want our students' gaps increasing in terms of reading ability, and we always review our old material, which leads to teaching this block of knowledge. We've chunked it up now. Rather than teaching one large area, it's delivered in chunks and sections where we can model, gauge how much the students actually know, and then provide feedback. So it's that continued dialogue and understanding and assessing what the students know. And that's where the questioning has become really important. Assessing, as I said, not only is questioning become really important, these quizzes, these hinge questions that we use in our lessons to see whether students understand is really important. Again, if the students are all scoring 100%, is it really challenging enough? But we also need to reflect on, once we've modelled and scaffolding it, if they do understand it, it's time to move on. So we have that assessing, that we have these practice assignment to assess where they are. So we're looking at a piece of work effectively. And as I said, we're collecting feedback the whole time. With that feedback, we're looking at whether there are common misconceptions. Do we need to deliver again online, or do we need to revisit something online that the students don't understand? And it's this train that I keep referring to, where students are moving at the same pace. Otherwise, we're going to have real gaps, and that will aid our planning. So we've adapted how we provide feedback now, where feedback is essentially reflecting on what the students know, what they don't know, who don't know certain areas, and what we can do to provide necessary support. Mastery, basically, is the focus of our feedback now.
Hi, my name is Rom Harnais. I'm the Assistant Director of Learning at Woolwich Polytechnic School for Boys, which is part of the PolyMAT. Today I will be talking to you about retrieval and how to use retrieval when delivering your lessons online. Now, with retrieval, first it's important to define the term. So retrieval is the act of recalling learned information from memory. When we talk about retrieval, there are two very important concepts to remember. That's retrieval storage and retrieval strength. Retrieval storage is how well information is embedded in your long-term memory, when retrieval strength is how easily it is for you to remember a piece of information whenever required. Now, with retrieval, there were three main benefits for us to use retrieval online. The first one was that it helped with later retention. So us using what we're delivering online and ensuring that we linked learning and that learning was continuous, going from one online lesson to the next. The other benefit to retrieval was that it led to better results over time, especially with our examination classes, ensuring that when it was time for us eventually to go back in the classroom, that we didn't have too many gaps in students' learning. And finally, the third main benefit to using retrieval online, and for me is probably the most important one, in that with retrieval, it actually helps with students reusing the skills that they've learned and applying the skills to new context, and doing so them adapting their learning. And this is where also it actually strengthens students' self-regulation and metacognition. Now, three main websites that you use: Microsoft Forms Quiz, Seneca, and Eggerty. Microsoft Forms Quiz that you actually can set up by yourself, but doing so, remember to jumble up the topics and leave gaps over time. Seneca, that actually uses three different recall strategies: retrieval, spacing, and interleaving. They have what they call a smart learning algorithm. And then finally, Eggerty Maths. Eggerty Maths that actually uses Fix Up 5, where students are given 5 questions daily, questions that they get wrong, and they actually get a chance to revisit their incorrect answers. And they have also a space retrieval practice, which is called memory, where students revisit questions they get right. And that's something that also helped our students with retrieval. The best of the rest, the other three, Kahoot, which is also a very exciting learning platform to use with students online. But also Kahoot recently, not so recently, but Kahoot now, for those of you who used it a few years ago, offers homework. That is very good also to home with. You Polypo in Teams as well, but this has to be done online, however. It's actually very good because it's valuable feedback that you receive instantly without interrupting your lesson. You don't have to have any other window. All you have to do is to go to the chat section. You click on messaging extension, and then you click on Poly. You can either give students a quiz that they have to answer online instantly, or you can give them an open question, and again, you receive their answers online. Now, Quizlet has a feature where students view questions, and until they get it correctly twice, they are given the same questions again and again. And this is what we call successive relearning, and the importance of retrieving information multiple times.
So the last part that we've discovered is for our remote teaching, why questioning is so important and what we can get from it. It's such an influential tool in our teaching when we are actually even in the classroom at the moment. So it's not just with our remote teaching we've kind of refined and reflected upon our questioning, because it's something we've been excellent as a school in the past. And it's a colleague of mine, Di Baker, who's in charge of humanities, actually has put together a lot of these points on questioning, where it's something that we still need to improve on, like anything else. And this period has allowed us to develop and reflect as teachers how we question and what's the purpose of questioning. So these are really, this guy's fantastic. He's excellent informative feedback. It's one of his specialist areas. And he has put together these 2 key points why we question. And it's not to create just student engagement, just to get the students involved. These are the 2 reasons why we should be questioning in our lessons. And what we did, again, we assessed what were the problems. So we put together some of the issues, what we wanted to avoid with our remote teaching. We didn't want that awkward silence. We wanted to try and create a culture where everybody participates. What students can we really target specific questions to? How we're going to tackle those students that don't really engage as much, and making sure there was a level of challenge in the correct pitch for our students. As I said before, we want everybody moving at the same pace, which is a real challenge for any teacher, and mastery really was influenced by the types of questions we put together. So when we're thinking about questioning, we wanted to look at what we need to think about if we are establishing knowledge and understanding. So who has answered the question? Is it the whole class? And if the whole class answers at the same time and knows the answer, is it really a challenging question? Are we getting any feedback from that? They know it, so why craft that question? So we wanted to target individuals more than anything else. So we had specific questions targeted to students to gauge whether the students understood and whether the class understood, and what misconceptions we needed to revisit. Other things which I'm guilty of are facial expressions. So were we giving hints? Were we giving prompts? Were we lip read, or were we finishing sentences for them? Did you finish the question for the answer for them? So prompting, things like what's the capital of France? And there's silence, and P-A, and you end up providing the answer for them. And we're all guilty of that, or even going through the actual word. So we wanted to kind of take that away from our questioning. So we also reflected on what we need to think about of questioning is prompting thinking. Again, Di Baker put something together on this which was fantastic. So do students have the materials to answer the question? So she looked at, have you taught the right content, or have you taught the content and the concepts that they need to answer that actual question? Is the knowledge they have or they need to draw on there, or is it general knowledge that you are kind of relying on that's not in the content that you've delivered? One of the other things that Di suggested was playing guess what's in my head. So is one answer really enough? Are they kind of guessing what you're trying to think of? And how carefully is that question put together for the students to dig, or for you to dig deeper in their understanding? And how is that informing your planning? And this is something we really wanted to focus on with our online learning, because it really did influence where the students are and what we needed to do as teachers. The last point that we looked at was what we need to do to think about in terms of questioning whether it's embedded, or is it embedded in our learning? So do students challenge, do the questions actually challenge the students to think? Are they having to draw forward information forward, like, for example, practicing retrieval? Are they having to manipulate what they have learned in relation to the past? And one of the things that we really encourage in this school is thinking time. So are you providing enough thinking time for the students to reflect on their actual learning? So 15 seconds we try to advise, because if they're quick, snappy answers, then are the students thinking deeply about what they are trying to provide as an answer? And that leads to following up with your questions, delving deeper, which we really want to encourage. And one of the things that we did was students that were not confident, they answer in the chat box, and we prompt the debate there. And it worked really well, and it does work really well, where the students actually questioning each other, provide their own opinions, and there's real discussions. You do need to regulate as a teacher, as it can become off point or off task, but that's the nature of being a teacher sometimes. So this is where we are. As I said, one of the other points is actually feedback and planning. So what do we need to do as teachers? And that's why it does matter, because it makes us plan and think forward what we need to deliver. These are the online questioning kind of hints or crib sheet that we provided. Establishing a culture that's low stakes, so students participate. That's really something we want to encourage. Getting students to justify their answers, encouraging students to use the chat box, And thinking time, again, is really important for us as a school. I was fortunate enough to attend a Pixel meeting on thinking hard. One of the guys, I believe, at Dartford Grammar put together a series of think tank questions, or a crib sheet of such, and we actually use these in our lessons now. It's stuck on the desk, and this helps with our remote teaching as well, where the questions are kind of there to help us framework a question that we want to answer. It's challenging and allowing the students to think deeply. It does need, it's not the question that the crib sheet we always follow. It does need careful planning from the teacher to work out whether they need to revisit or provide feedback in different ways, but this is the framework that we have in terms of deep, or trying to get students to unlock their thinking. Okay, so I'm done. Thank you very much. Take care and have a good evening.
Live feedback and checking students' understanding online. Now, a few practical tips. First, on how to receive feedback and how to give feedback when you're online. First of all, in sharing the ground rules is important. Ensuring students know exactly what they can and can't do online. So in our mat, we have a first slide that we introduce each time before delivering our online lesson to ensure that every student understands what the ground rules are. Another practical tip is to have 2 different devices when you are teaching online. One device that actually will be your main focus when delivering the lesson, and a second one can be your phone, the tablet, where you are monitoring the chat section and you are responding to students' questions and misconceptions and exploring with them misconceptions. Another one, ensuring that all students are on mute, that you say student names. Now, it's very important. It was very important for us to have that warm approach of still interacting with our students and also encouraging them to use their microphones. However, if you do so, you want to ensure that students raise their hands online and that you say students' names so they know that they're allowed to talk. And those are just practical tips that we are sharing with you. Probably you knew all of them already. Now, question, but how do you check understanding? Now, for us, we actually use 2 main strategies. The first one is quick checks. Every other slide, or every 3-4 slides, it was important for us to have a series of questions, no more than 5 questions each time, to ensure students understood what they were learning. Important that also you, with these questions, that you provide students, learners, with definition and keywords, so all students are supported. Very important not to overwhelm your slides with information, long text, or long definitions. It has to be as interactive as possible. Another strategy that we used was the use of summaries, and we use the selection, organize, and integrate model. So that model basically says is about students using their critical thinking and selecting how they wanted the information to look like, organize the information, and then process the information. So a few examples of summaries. So summaries, you could actually ask students to summarize what they've learned. However, you need to do it in a smart way. Don't just ask them, okay, what was the lesson about? Ask them, okay, what were the 3 most important critical pieces of information in that lesson? And can you write maybe a 20 words summary about these points? You can also, if you are introducing text and use read now task online, ask them underneath, I don't know, each paragraph to write a summary of the paragraph. Then after that, you ask them for each paragraph that they summarize to put together at the end of the lesson a summary of the lesson, exactly 20 words, which is also a metacognition technique. Also, using Cornell notes. Using Cornell notes online might not be practical for some subjects, but for others, it does work. However, when using the Cornell notes, it's important that students prepare the format of the Cornell notes. Why? Because the Cornell notes being in 3 different sections. You've got a section for the summary of the lesson, where students take the notes in the middle part. You've got also the section for the questions, the key questions about the notes. And at the bottom of the Cornell notes page is where the summary of the lesson goes. The point being that when students revisit the notes they've taken during the lesson, they can just cover the middle part, ask themselves the questions, and uncover the notes part to see if they get the questions right. Similarly, you have the summary at the bottom. They can do something similar where they cover both the notes part and the summary and see if they can remember what they've learned.